Now, RFA Argos, part of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. For those people that don't know, what exactly is the Royal Fleet Auxiliary?
Well, the Royal Fleet is we're a government-owned, a government-manned and owned organisation, part of the Royal Navy, and we support all three services: the Royal Navy, the Royal Marines, the Army, and the Air Force in activities, training, and operations all around the world.
Now, I know that we do have naval officers and crew on board, but you yourself, part of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, you're actually civilians, aren't you?
That's correct. We are civilians. We're trained to Merchant Navy STCW standards, but we also complemented with a lot of naval training as well.
So how did you start? Did you always want to sail?
I did. I started at the age of 16. I was going to go to sea. In fact, I was going to do my A-levels, but I decided to go to sea early. So I started at 16, and I've been doing now for nearly 29 years.
Now, RFA Argos, I hope you don't mind me saying, she's an unusual looking ship, isn't she? I have never seen a ship quite like her, because she certainly doesn't look at all like a frigate or a destroyer, but at the same time she's not really an aircraft carrier. Tell me a little bit about her history, because of course she didn't start with the RFA, did she?
No, she started as the MV Contender Byzance as a container ship. A keel was laid back in 1980. She operated for a few years, and then during the Falklands in '82 we took her up from trade, and we used her in a commercial mode as a sort of carrying capacity, taking stuff down to the Falklands. She worked so well for us that a few years later the MOD decided to buy her. So in 1985 we converted her to the RFA Argus. She was initially just the aviation training ship, and then a few years later the sort of medical side of things came along, so we got a field hospital embarked on board the ship, and then years and years after that it developed, and now we are the MOD's primary casualty reception facility, which is our primary role, as well as the aviation training ship.
Now, you're not actually, although you are a hospital ship, internationally you're not recognised as such though, are you? Why is that?
There are certain rules governing what a hospital ship is under the Geneva Convention. We don't comply with that. We never intended to comply with that. We are just a military defence ship on normal government duties, so we are armed defensively. We can operate anywhere in the world, and we just happen to have the primary casualty reception facility on board as one of our sort of primary roles.
That's quite a mouthful, isn't it? That's why I call it a hospital ship, and I know I'm not really meant to. So, what sort of roles has RFA Argos actually played as a hospital ship? She's been to the Gulf, hasn't she?
Yeah, she's operated in the Gulf. We've done many exercises operating the reception facility. It does take a lot of resources to operate it. So in a training environment, we do pull on a lot on the NHS to do that. So it does take a little planning. However, the numbers that are involved are all nominated, so that in a crisis situation where we were activated, they could be activated at very short notice to embark on the ship.
I believe you go out and do a lot of humanitarian work as well, don't you?
Yeah, she was deployed out in the Caribbean the year before last, doing exactly that, humanitarian support and aid.
And tell us a little bit about her role as an aviation training ship.
Well, as the Navy's sort of aviation training ship, we primarily, which is our secondary role, at the moment we're primarily sort of training squadrons who are ready to embark on either another RFA or onto a Royal Naval ship, to almost marinise them, because our job is to sort of not only train the air crews in how to land and take off from a ship, the procedures involved in that, but also there's the ground crews in supporting the aircraft, the engineers, and also the ground crews, the flight deck parties in embarking. That's all done by the squadron staff, and the facility we have on board does all that sort of training. There's also the facility of them engaging with the ship and interacting with the ship and everything like that.
There's something that made me smile, because in our family we always look at big ships and go, how do they float? They're so heavy, how do they float? This ship, as it was a container ship, it potentially was going to be unstable, wasn't it? So you had to do something, didn't you?
Well, originally a lot of the weight in the ship was the original stores with the containers. So when we took all that out, all the original space for the containers is now the hangars and part of the hospital facility. That is now, on the lower end of the ship, we've got lots of concrete ballast, and we've got permanent water ballast, and that keeps us upright.
What's the displacement? It's meant to be huge.
We're about 29,000 tonnes at the moment.
And we're stood here by some amazing equipment. Well, I think it's amazing anyway, but I believe it's a similar sort of equipment that they used in World War II. But explain what we can see on this screen here.
Well, we've got this is a radar, and what this is doing is just transmitting a beam out. You can see it rotating around here. It's sending a beam out. It bounces off any sort of object, returns to the ship, and it can detect how far away that is and in what direction. And we can see here, this is the Bournemouth beach line along here, with Bournemouth Pier here, and the beach going along the front. We've got HMS Westminster and HMS Mersey here, with the French ship Sagittaire just behind us in a line just off the beach, with a small craft just off the shore. We can just see an aircraft just disappearing off the side here.
So when you are, out in the ocean, how can you actually identify these little sort of yellow blobs, what you're actually seeing?
Well, the computer behind this calculates exactly what the ship's doing, the other ships are doing, and how close it's going to come to us. So we use that for collision avoidance, so we can obviously stay away from each other at sea. We've also got a system called automatic identification system, and that every ship transmits on that, and we can see here the HMS Mersey is transmitting, and from that we can tell exactly what the ship's doing, where it's coming from, what it's doing. And any other smaller contacts we could identify if they were maybe hostiles or not.
So if there is, I'm no piracy, I mean, it is a huge problem, and I know the Royal Navy do an awful lot to try and to sort of combat that. But if it's a pirate ship, presumably it isn't going to be identified. I mean, how are you going to tell?
Again, it's usually visually. We would be in convoys and we'd go out and try and visually identify the contact. A lot of them tend to work in a certain profile, so you can tell if it's a fisherman who's going to be stopped and doing nothing. And obviously, as I say, most commercial ships will always have identification systems, so we know exactly who they are. I
certainly wouldn't mess with this ship if I could see it. Now, I believe there's another chap over here who can tell me more about the navigation. Follow me around here because I'm going to go and speak to Stuart. Thank you so much, Shane. Thank you. Here is our navigator, Stuart. Welcome. Stuart, tell me a little bit about, I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what it must be like manoeuvring this ship. I mean, take me through it. What do you do?
Yeah, well, we've got two propellers and two rudders. We're fairly manoeuvrable, actually. I mean, coming into the anchorage today, we stopped fairly quickly. It was pretty good for us to do that. We've got a bow thruster, so actually, I mean, for her size, she's a fairly manoeuvrable ship. So it's
And how do you actually navigate your way across the oceans?
Okay, well, I mean, we obviously have the modern ACE navigation, so GPS, but we still, have to learn and practice the more traditional methods, such as using the sextant and visual bearings, magnetic compass, all that sort of stuff. So it's, it's not all lost to history.
So things haven't really changed in 200-300 years.
Lots of things have, but we still have to use the traditional methods to make sure we know where we are, and use it as a backup to the modern ACE navigation. I mean, just relying on one source wouldn't be particularly great, really.
Yeah. Now, I watched some of the guys earlier because we've had helicopters, flying on and off the ship, and they were standing here. Can you show me this?
Yeah, so
this equipment?
This actual piece of kit here, this is just the centerline gyro. So, I mean, for coming into port, this is where I'll normally be positioned to navigate the ship in using visual bearings. I can work out, by having a head mark, I can work out how far left or right of track I am, and my distances to run using a beam bearing and all that sort of thing. So it's a pretty handy piece of kit, essential really, for the way we navigate.
If there are any young people listening here today that really fancy sort of a role in the RFA or in the Navy, I mean, how long did it take you to train to get to be a navigator?
I did my A-levels at school and joined at 18, and then I did a 3-year cadetship with the RFA, and just recently I've completed my fleet navigation officer's course with the Royal Navy, and I mean, that's I've been in the RFA now for nearly 10 years, so it takes time, but if people want to progress, there's a really good career here, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us, and it's been a brilliant trip here aboard RFA Argos.